It's for a video that I'm going to make in the future called America's Identity in 12 States, where I'll go through the histories of, let me pull up the states. I'll go through the histories of California, South Carolina, Florida, Louisiana, Massachusetts, Nebraska, New Mexico, and a couple other states to basically show how America would develop, how America works as a society. And I'm also making a video about American civilization. So I've been, on top of that, just video production's really good. I've changed the audio, or I've changed the production style I have for WhatifAltHist so that now I can put out 6 videos a month. And that's really cool. But a lot of videos are waiting from sponsors. And I'm just going to, and so I have like 4 or 5 videos that are backlogged waiting for sponsors to approve them. And just for spoilers on 2 of them, I am releasing a video on decadence and I'm releasing a video on the future of Europe in the next like week. So very excited about that. What questions do you all have for me? I'm only answering on Pearl. Hi, Matt. What's up?
Oh, hey, cool. Ooh, we just pushed a last-minute update. I'm glad it's working.
Nice. What was the problem before? This live stream has been going for like 5 minutes or something, or 9 minutes. Wow.
Not sure. We're just pushing a last-minute update.
Okay. What have you been up to?
I just got up super late actually, but I've been working with the engineering
Same.
team to.
Hi, audio went out. Hi, hear me?
Make sure everything's put.
Your audio's clicking in and out, Matt.
I think
Yep,
it's
we
because
can
my
hear you,
phone is
Bezzy.
kind of lock mode.
Okay, amazing. What if AltHist still did AltHist videos? How would that affect history and culture? Bro, if I still made AltHist videos rather than going to geopolitics and culture, no one would have heard of me. But, like, I mean, realistically, lots of people say that I don't do alternate history anymore as a sellout. And truth be told, I just don't enjoy making alternate history anymore. It's just not something that I find meaningful. Where, like, I made alternate history as a teenager because it felt fun. And then once I expanded out of that to making history, predicting the future and understanding the meaning behind history, then what happened was that it just felt a lot less meaningful. It's like how a lot of fiction writers start writing fanfic, and then over time their fanfic becomes more and more expensive until it becomes actual fiction. And I think that's really what happened with me. And I'm sorry if that triggers alternate history fans, but like, yeah, you can be triggered. I legit don't care if that many of you are triggered. Like, it's not going to affect me that much in my real life. Like, be as triggered as you want about anything I say.
I think a few of your videos take that to heart.
You mean the social justice one?
Oh my goodness, yeah. Cool. We have a question on India, I think that we should answer. Let me read it off, Rudyard. So he said, last live stream, audio got cut out around the India point, and the question is, so could you describe India's future internally and externally after the fall of the CCP?
What would the fall of CCP have to do with India? So India is a rough case where, from the data, happy news, WhatifAltHist has a permanent research assistant who does really sick research projects. And I've had him research South Asia lately. And the results for South Asia are just fascinating. They're perfectly set up for a Turchin collapse, where you see, it's interesting, the modernization in India is driven off services, where India's industrial sector has not grown at all, really. And but their service sector has grown extremely, extremely rapidly. And because of that, but a couple different things are happening where wages are stagnating in India, and at the same time, you're seeing a tremendous amount of elite competition, which is why there are so many Indians who watch my music videos, because they don't have jobs. But I mean, with everything I've seen, it looks like India is going to have a secular crisis. And I kind of take the opinion of Amaury Zariancourt, who said that India is in some ways positioned to become a fascist state or a Nazi state, or not so much Nazi, because it's really hard to be Nazi now because Nazis become the definition of evil, but something along the lines of, if anyone in the world will try to use genetic engineering to create a Superman, it's India, because this is a culture that already has the idea of transcending the human. That's been most of their religious history, and at the same time, they also have the caste system, which was a pre-existing assumption that humans are not equal. So I think India, at some point, will have an ideology built around genetic engineering. But India, across its history, has been a generally pretty chill and a chill and low-key energy place. And what normally happens when you put societies under a tremendous amount of pressure, the shadow comes out. And the shadow is the parts of your personality that you hide and the parts that aren't well integrated. So Germany spent most of its history as a deeply civilized, moral nation. They're put under pressure. You get the Nazis. Most of Chinese history is spent being humane, very moral, and then you put them under pressure, you get Mao, which is kind of the opposite. And so I think China will get the opposite in many ways of what its norm is, and then it's going to turn around and revert back to being more calm after a major war or something happens. And once India gets wealthier, it will have the ability to export its cultural power to neighboring areas like Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka and Burma. And the thing is, India is a civilization, and it's not entirely built upon Hinduism, where Hinduism is a very multifaceted religion, and it believes that all other religions are roads to go, different ladders leading to the same God. And because of that, Hindus have been okay or pretty good compared to many other religions in the world, especially the Abrahamic faiths, because they're just more. There's more. It's such a big tent religion, and so I think Hinduism has a potential of basically chilling out, and the Indians creating a federation of Indic civilizations, which includes Pakistan, Burma, etc. Yo, can you get this Russian guy who just?
Yeah, we're in the process of banning him already.
Why don't I have banning abilities?
We have flagging abilities to delete messages, but we're adding that in.
Okay.
The team's already on banning him. Cool, Roger, do you want to hit the next question? Hey,
Yeah,
Roger.
so hi, how you doing? What other new questions do you guys have?
All right, let's roll through the chat and find some. Someone has an interesting question on Ethiopia. Do you think Ethiopia can be an African power?
I've literally made a video about this. The answer is yes. I think the two areas in Africa that have the highest chances of being powers are Ethiopia and Tanzania. That has like really that has a history of the state, and that's not something that exists in like rest of Africa. There really isn't that precedent. And Ethiopia also has a more temperate Mediterranean climate.
Isn't Ethiopia going through like a collapse right now?
They are, which is one of the things. Like Bismarck Analysis has a good piece saying why Ethiopia won't become a future superpower, and I think it's very well reasoned. Where it basically is that Ethiopia is a federation of various tribes like the Amhara, the Oromo, the Tigray, the Somalis, and but what they've done is something that a lot of sub-Saharan African countries have done is power sharing, where you see alternating leadership between those various tribal groups. And Ethiopia has been a country over the last 1,500 years, but it's alternating between different tribes ruling. And because Ethiopia is so mountainous, it's hard to create ethnic unity, like in the same way the Roman Empire just steamrolled 1,000 different tribes. And so the original state of Aksum was Tigray, and then the state of Ethiopia that was in the Middle Ages was Oromo, Oromo. And because of that disunity, Ethiopia has a worse shot. But Ethiopia is also the only country in Africa that's really industrializing. And what's happening right now is that the power sharing relationship broke down. And so the Tigray were in a lot of ways prodded into rebellion by having their freedoms restricted. Then the Tigray rebelled. The Tigray are winning the rebellion. They're pushing towards Addis Ababa. But something to consider is that having a civil war or an internal conflict isn't that predictive of future success, even in the near future. Where U.S. Civil War, U.S. fought it, then the U.S. became greatest power in the world in the next decades after that. English Civil War, England did the exact same thing. Russian Civil War, Russia became one of the most powerful nations in the world after it. Same with France after its revolution. They got Napoleon. And having problems now is not indicative of where your status will be 20 years from now, because oftentimes problems are ways of clearing out disunities in leadership and creating a strong, unified leadership that forces the nation forward. And so, like lots of people say, Turkey is going through like massive inflation now. There's no way they'll be powerful in 40 years. But I say Japan was hit the worst by the Great Depression of almost any country in the world. But Japan still had strong fundamentals, and it seized control of all of East Asia during World War II.
Rolling through some of the questions. Have you seen any of the questions in the chat, Rudyard, that interest you?
There's just so many, Matt. It's like hard for me to keep track.
Yeah.
Can we not do a geopolitics question?
So nothing about famine, unfortunately.
Yeah, we'll get to it later, Matt. But my entire job is geopolitics, so I want to return. I want to throw a different kind of question for the second.
Sure. I'm not sure if you answered this one, but it's quite interesting. Someone asked, "What is America's shadow?" Did you answer that one?
Yeah, America's shadow, much as it hates me to agree with them, is white supremacy. It's actually America has two shadows. One is white supremacy, the other is materialism, where 19th century America was in many ways one of the most moral countries in history. It treated white immigrants extremely well. It industrialized. It was a pretty fair, one of the fairest societies in the world if you were white, but it was an absolutely brutal society to non-white people. And America is uniquely white-centric, racist among countries in the Americas because America's been like a steady 80% white, and I'm adding Hispanics in there now, so America's still 80% non-whites. So if you were black in America, you had no way up in society. And if you were black in Brazil, you could become a lawyer. You could become a wealthy plantation owner. And that was rare, but it still could happen. And the same is true with the Indians, where in a lot of countries, like an interesting thing I found is that the Catholic countries tend to be a lot harsher on the Catholic countries tend to be, you need to ban this guy Gerver. He's just posting.
Yeah, the team's constantly banning people.
Okay. Can you create something for like banning people for like 60 seconds?
Yeah, we're doing permanent bans on people, so they shouldn't be able to recreate accounts.
Yeah. So also just the Catholic countries tend to be pretty nice to the natives, and the Protestant ones tend to be a lot harder. And I think that's because it's easier to convert natives. I'm not entirely sure why. I think it's a couple different reasons. And so America has a worse attitude towards race than a lot of other countries. And the other thing is materialism, where Americans are willing to basically throw everything except money out the window. Americans are weird people where they're simultaneously extremely generous and not caring about money, but also they're extremely materialistic at other times. Like Americans have the highest donation to charity per capita of any nation in the world, or Americans tend to be extremely Americans in a lot of ways, or like they tend to be very mystical and not caring about money for some things. But for materialism, like I just think of California versus New Zealand, where I've heard that the two were generally pretty similar in the 30s. So like I heard California is one of those beautiful places in the world. And then what did Americans do? Americans paved over paradise, as the song literally said. And California just isn't like that anymore. And like that's not the case elsewhere. Like in Canada, around Toronto, they've done a very good job of building a green belt around Toronto to keep Toronto from developing super fast. And Canada's done a much better job of maintaining its natural areas than did America. And so I'd say America's shadow tendencies are racism and materialism. And so the irony is that social justice, if it forces the worst thing social justice does is humiliate young men because and prideful young men, because I read a psychological book saying the best way to get murdered is to humiliate a young man. And that's basically what social justice is doing with talking to toxic masculinity, is that it's pushing away, because both sexes tend to have fragile egos in some ways, and men have their own fragile egos in some way. And so by basically alienating young men, social justice is creating a horrifying backlash that's worse than what they created, or it could be worse than what they created. And so America's shadow, if it does come out, maybe after social justice humiliation, maybe after a really horrible war, would be something like an extremely racist, hyper-capitalist society.
We have another one that's pretty interesting. People are asking a lot of questions about Europe. So what they're saying is that let me see if I could find it. Basically, the question is from Lars, and it's with France going through another revolution of some sort, which I assume they're going to have some sorts of problems because they always do, but we'll see. And general German weakness in the fall of the EU, they're wondering what the fate of the lowland countries, such as the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg, will be. Quite an interesting question.
Yeah, so I would say they naturally divide. If Europe falls apart, Western Europe splits between two spheres of influence, or the French in the Latin nations and the Germans in the Germanic. And Scandinavia is pretty self-sufficient. And with that, Scandinavia can basically just split off. They can feed themselves. They've got their own financial system. Their supply chains they don't have any real reason to have beef, but also they don't have that much in real physical terms, whether trade, military, geography, that unifies them. So I think the French and the Germans, in a crisis, would get their own like spheres of influence in that area. And the Low Countries, the Netherlands, I think would get. The Low Countries can largely choose who they side with. Where I think Germany would probably get the Netherlands as a satellite state, and Belgium would probably go with France, although you could realistically see Belgium split between Flanders and Wallonia, or the French and Dutch-speaking areas. But also, I could see the Dutch and the Belgians going with the French to keep the Germans from controlling them. I've seen Peter Zeihan make a very interesting case that the Netherlands and Belgium will become American allies to keep them from getting influenced by the French and the Germans. And I think that's something that's quite plausible, because both the Netherlands and Belgium largely exist to be ports that face the North Sea, and because of Europe's disunity, they've become independent. It's like if Shanghai became independent from the rest of China. And the Dutch and the Belgians have always used the British to keep independent from other continental nations. And so I could see the Americans supporting the Belgians and the Dutch against the rest of Europe. But that depends on how influenced America America would be.
Also, we'll work on the ban.
Is there any way your team could just quickly give me the banning ability?
It's more complicated than that. You have to like
Okay.
be able to. It's like whack-a-mole in a sense. So you have to be able
Um,
to hit multiple emails, IP addresses, etc.
I'm
But
just
it's
gonna.
en route.
Go ahead.
Yeah, this
Sorry,
guy
go
like changed IPs and is coming back. So
on.
Wow, the Russians are good at hacking.
yeah. We're doing our best
Exceedingly.
here. Yeah, give us a minute. We'll have him out again.
Okay.
This is a question you might like, Rudyard.
Yes.
It's do you think that Christianity will decline and die in America by 2100? They Jonathan Seed read an article that it was losing 2% of followers every year in the U.S. and the implications for that are massive for politics and birth rates as well.
Um, with Christianity declining, I think the most likely result is that in the West, we've largely just seen the promulgation of Abrahamic beliefs with the Greek philosophers, and I think that gives Westerners kind of like a do or die attitude towards ideology. But if you look at the East, in China, for example, what you saw was piling on different belief structures on top of each other, and you had like the prehistoric beliefs in ancient religions. You had or the prehistoric belief in like heaven. You had like nature cults, worship of ancestors, all of which goes back thousands upon thousands of years. Then you have Confucianism, Taoism, Buddhism, communism, all of which add another layer on top of them. And the Chinese just accept that. And I think that's going to happen in the West, where I think Christianity has a lot of vigor in it. And I don't think anyone will be able to replace Jesus in the Western mind. And I think Jesus is a very compelling figure. So I think even in the West in 2,000 years, people will still be praying to Christ because Christ is such a powerful symbol of that which cannot be transcended, and you cannot transcend that which cannot be transcended. And Amaury de Riancourt talks a lot about how the West looks for a third dimension or space time and then beyond. And Jesus is really the sign of that beyond, of being able to transcend human suffering. And I think in the West, what's going to happen is that Christianity will exist and then another faith comes on top of it, like Jordan Petersonism. I think there's a big chance Jordan Peterson becomes like a next Confucius or some figure like Jordan Peterson. And because of that, I think that Jordan Petersonism or some equivalent of it will result in a re-strengthening of Christianity because it's able to counterbalance the weaknesses in Christianity and create a secular way to create Christian values.
Interesting. So Christianity can come back in the West it's
I
kind of
think
hard to
Christianity
believe.
would come back through the vehicle of Jordan Petersonism, where if Jordan Petersonism could become a coherent
I thought you loved this guy.
No, he was addicted to benzos, and it just ruined his life for a couple years.
I see. So I guess like wouldn't there be a I imagine there'd be a very big problem with Christianity coming back in the West now because it got killed so hard by its, as you told me a while ago, Christianity seeks the truth, which led to the scientific revolution, a lot of things of that nature. And
Yeah.
then the West really killed Christianity through it. And Nietzsche
religion.
Which I assume it has to.
Alexei, carry on. You don't have to pay me for questions. I'll just answer yours for free. But Alexei's a friend of mine, and
Do you want to invite him on stage?
Sure thing. But yeah. Alexei, do you want to go on stage?
If you raise your hand, Alexei, we can invite you up. Oh wait, hold on. Joe says that we're still launching that feature right now.
Sad.
Okay, we'll do it pretty soon. Don't worry.
But with America has always, in its inception and for most of its history, America has been a society with a deist ruling class, and the founding fathers were very the founding fathers were very religious in the way that they believed that the universe had a divine plan. And with that, so modern science believes that the world has no meaning and is just a continual puttering on. And that's something that doesn't have the American South and Midwest, where people would just Methodism and Presbyterianism, and sorry, Baptism, because people would just basically go into the stream and have their souls be saved and have their sins removed from them, and then they'd like just party, and people would go really hard at these church events in the 1740s. The exact same thing happened in the 1840s in the American South and Midwest. 1940s, post-World War II religious boom. And so it wouldn't surprise you if in the 2040s, there's a giant boost in new American religion. And if I had to guess, it'd be based on something like psychedelics, which are pretty similar to the earlier Great Awakenings, where what people would do is they'd just get really, go out in these outside, and then they'd just lose themselves in the ecstasy of religion, and they just go crazy until the divine spirit moved through them, and then they became giant social events. And something like that would be really big, because the two things America are missing is religious transcendence and community. And so if you did like psychedelics and had a church like a rave, which is what Pentecostalists do, it would be something that would attract a lot of young people.
Well, it sounds very exciting. It reminds me of the I forgot who it was. I think George Friedman put a book about it where he talked about
George Friedman?
oh no.
I've read like everything he puts out.
I forgot who it was, but there's the four turnings are William Strauss and Neil Howe, I think. Yeah. And the third one, like Clockwork, is always the second one, like Clockwork, is always the awakening. The last manifestation was pretty strange.
That's Strauss Howe.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of questions about Vouch, and I'm going to purposely not talk a lot because I don't really like drama, and so if someone tries to engage in drama with me, I'm just going to ignore them. But it's like I do not trust Vouch's debating style. He did not argue in good faith, and I don't think realistically there's a way either could have won, because we're just coming at from such a different position, and I do not respect Vouch's style or way. And you guys can say whatever you want about the debate and how it turned out, and you're at your own liberty for that.
Let's roll through some of the
It is-
questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, go on.
I just find it deeply amusing that my fans say that I won the debate and his fans say that he won the debate, and it makes you lose total faith in the human race. And the fact that whenever you get the right and the left together for a debate and they just fucking kill each other, I think that is a really poor sign of how of the nature of our society.
Yeah, I mean, I forgot what it was. There was some fancy Latin quote that I told you about that I read a long time ago, which said people with fundamentally different foundations cannot have a debate. And so there's a principle with startups where when you build a product, if everyone rates the product 1 to 5, and 5 being they love it, you want to spend half your time on the people who love it and the other half the time on the people who are almost there. They're at 4s.
Yeah.
So the problem is that his audience are all the exact opposite typically of the people who would like your ideology and belief system. And so there's no way to really convert them. And therefore it just becomes a tribal war that's through words rather than through guns or bows and arrows, for example.
Yeah. And I mean, that whole debate convinced me to basically say, I'm making a video, 12 mistakes not to make when you build an ideology or religion. So here are some of the answers. 1, put your utopia on this earth. 2, build your worldview off conspiracy theories. 3, claim that a single idea can encapsulate reality and you have all the answers. 4, centralize absolute power among the good people. 5, create a way
of the new form of American Christianity, which will cause a Romanesque dominance of the world. Crafty. Yeah, we're working on ban mechanisms. We'll have a much better functionality for it within a week or 2. I'm not too worried about it. But right now it's whack-a-mole for fun.
Whack-a-mole. Yes.
Yeah, it's what it is. So for subscriptions, everybody, basically, if you subscribe, what happens is that we can tell you're a subscriber in the chat, and it means your questions will get answered. So for example, if you have a question about the European Union or India or the coming famine or Ukraine, for example, and you really want it answered, become a subscriber and we'll see it and we'll answer your questions. Also, I think potentially on this call, we might be able to invite you up on stage to have a verbal conversation too, if you'd like. That functionality might be ready to go today. Otherwise, we'll be ready for the next one.
Nice.
Ooh,
also, why
Joshua
is
Yanko?
Yanko.
Sorry.
Nice.
He asked your thoughts on CANZUK. It's a great topic.
Yeah, I don't think it would work because the British don't provide any leadership in the world anymore, really. And it would have to be organized by Britain. I think it makes sense. I mean, none of those nations are really in bad positions for it, and all of them are kind of down. Like, I'm a Canadian citizen. I want to move to London. I wouldn't move to London. I would spend a couple months there. But I mean, I think it would be really sick because none of the countries have that much to lose and they can all gain a little bit. However, I think if the world goes to more and more shit, I think it's possible that America makes a version of CANZUK. If we end up in a world where different confederacies, world confederacies, establish themselves, so if like the Turks build a confederacy, if India builds its Indic Civilization Confederacy, I think it would make sense that the US would build like some sort of organization with all the Anglo countries. But the problem with that is that those Anglo countries keep their pride by not being the US. And so you would have to see a change in the cultural atmosphere. The greater Mediterranean. And what happened was that the Latin states rebelled against the Romans in the clusterfuck that was the first century BC in order to get the privileges of being a Roman citizen. But the problem that we see compared to America is that America isn't as heavy-handed with its Anglo-allied states as the Latins were with, as the Romans were with the Latins. And what happened was that so it would be like if the US would just conscript Canadians to fight in American armies, or if the US would just create giant construction projects across Canada without the Canadians thinking about it. And because of that, the Canadians would want to get involved in the American electoral system so that they could determine the things that happen in their countries. And also, Canada's the second biggest country in the world, 40 million people. These Latin allied states were like small towns and places around Italy. And it's harder to make a system because the Australians, the British, the Canadians, they all love the Americans in a fundamental way. But at the same time, they build their identities around not being Americans. And like JJ talks about Canada being a really big way of this. And I think a lot of these areas are purposely left wing to not be like America because they want to feel special. And that's a very powerful cultural current that would prevent them from being fundamentally unified into an American mega coalition. But realistically, these countries are part of the US's strategic umbrella, because if America fights a war, all of the Anglo countries are going to be fighting with America. They have a deal called the Five Eyes where they share all of their security information. So Britain can tap into all of America's information when it wants to. America can tap into Australia's information. And if the whole world goes to shit, the Anglo countries will still hold together. It's basically impossible to not have the Anglo countries. You need to get this guy banned. He's posting literal...
They're doing it. It's running passively. Well, it's running
Okay.
actively. Joe and Misha are on it constantly. So we don't have to talk about it or worry about it. They'll just do it automatically without us saying.
Okay.
That'll be improved for next week.
And is there a way to create a 60-second delay, or people can only post every 60 seconds? That's something on YouTube.
That is a fantastic feature idea. We will build that.
Yes. And it's really good. Hi, Noah. How you doing? There's like over like 15 or so WhatifAltHist fans that that I like keep up with on a normal basis and in correspondence with. And so I just like seeing them in the comments and saying hi.
Later in this call,
Also,
we might
Matt,
be able to invite them on stage.
With these visuals, there's no way I'm going to monetize this video.
Yeah, that makes sense. It'll be fixed for next time.
Yeah.
We have another question.
Do I have to put trigger warnings in the beginning? Like, I hate doing that, but I think it's like necessary.
Yeah, you can just make a note about a spam lord.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
separately, we
Is there
have another.
honestly, can we turn the chat off?
We don't have that ability.
I'm going to just mute this guy wherever he comes up.
So Joe and Misha are automatically muting him. They're watching the chat and like frying people left and right, so you
Okay.
don't have to worry about it. Everything that
Okay.
can be done is being done. And
Yeah,
they'll fundamentally
I
be
just
fixed
banned
for
him
next week.
again. We're pushing an update to hide the messages permanently the second it gets banned. So
Okay.
working on it as best we can.
How is it possible to have this many accounts?
I don't know. We're putting an IP ban every single time, so someone's working really, really hard here.
Yeah.
I think someone is very salty about no alternate history videos.
Yes. It shocks me that like Matt's one of my best friends until he's seen me develop as a person, and it always shocks me that my career started a combination of virginity and time. For that Russian guy while he's doing his shit. It always shocks me. I started out as a 13-year-old kid. I published my video on my 13th. I published my first big video on my 13th birthday, and it was just something I did because I read a YA book about what if the American Civil War never ended. It's a cool book called Time Riders, and I can get into that if you want. But like, I read that, and it just wasn't a realistic scenario where the French support the Union, the French and the Prussians support the Union, and the British supports the South, and the two make the American Civil War go on for 160 years. And so technology advances really quickly, and some things like we have genetically altered monsters that fight for each side, and we have giant zeppelins, and so the Civil War keeps going. But I just thought that was an unrealistic scenario, and I thought the scenarios in alternate history wiki were kind of bad. And because of that, I just made my own alternate history video, and I had no expectation of success. My videos sucked for years upon years upon years, and then this is my full-time job, and I like talk to influential people, and I honestly have a bigger audience than I think probably any history professor in the world, and it's just so crazy to just see the
That's
trajectory
nuts.
that happened, and I'm so thankful, and I can't believe that this happened.
That's wild that you have more than any other history professor in the world. But
I can't
that's
think
totally
of a history
true.
professor who has a bigger platform. There aren't like history professor celebrities.
True.
Make that a new state, or it could split Vancouver off as an independent territory, and the rest of British Columbia would be its own thing. Don't post retarded photos though, guys. Like that meme photo is retarded. And I will purposely ban people who post retarded photos.
So we have some more ones from subscribers. And so as a note, everybody, basically, if you're a subscriber, your profile will have a gold ring around it, which shows us that you are subscribers and you get heavy priority for your questions being answered. And either later on this call or next week, when you're a subscriber, you'll be able to actually come up on stage and ask your question and have an audio conversation one-on-one with Rudyard, which is pretty awesome. So anyway, we'll move on to the next question from a subscriber. And we'll also answer non-subscriber questions after we've answered the subscriber ones. There's just so many that this is really the only way to differentiate. So moving on, there's a question from Ronald Neufeld where he says that
hi,
hears
Ronald.
that more.
He's a big patron.
Oh, cool. He says that he hears that the more potash supply is being strained, that food prices inflate as a result, and that Morocco holds one of the largest supplies in the world. And he's wondering how they can influence the future of the world because of their potash supplies.
What's potash?
It's like a fertilizer ingredient.
Interesting. I know fertilizer is running into problems because it comes from Europe and it's exported to the rest of the world. And because of that, in a lot of the third world, soil is absolutely terrible, and people need fertilizer to farm anything. And that's the case for Africa, where population has gone up 5 times over since 1950 as fertilizer was introduced to Africa, which has naturally bad soil. Same with central Brazil, where there's this area called the Sertão in Brazil beyond the mountains. And that's an area that used to be a horrifying desert grassland. But then when limestone and fertilizer were introduced, it's some of the most fertile farmland in the world, where the area is entirely unfarmable until you mix limestone into the soil. And then with limestone, because there's nutrient deficiency, it becomes super, super fertile. And so I think that's the case. I don't know a lot of Morocco's beautiful.
Damn, tragic, but hilarious. Cool. We have another from I will not be able to say your name correctly, but Maciej Kozuzek, Maciej, and he says, "What will happen?" Yeah, it says, "What will happen to Poland and Eastern Europe after a war in Ukraine?" It's a good question.
I need to know what happens in a war with Ukraine, to be honest. If Russia loses, so Poland will deal with whatever the results are of Russia and Ukraine, depending upon no matter what happens. And if anything big happens in Ukraine, it affects Poland. So if the Ukraine devolves into, if Russia conquers Ukraine, they might go on to attack Poland next, even though I don't think that's likely. If Ukraine falls to shit, Poland's going to take the refugees. If Russia falls apart, Poland will become a subsidiary politically and economically of Poland. So Poland is just an extension of whatever's going on between Russia and Ukraine. Poland is also the guarantor. Poland structured this really beautiful alliance that stretches, it's called the Three Seas Initiative. It stretches from Estonia to Bulgaria. And the Poles have allied all of the NATO countries in Europe east of Germany into a single confederacy or a single alliance. Effective. Because Russia's inability to conquer Ukraine, although this is an extreme example, is kind of similar to the US not being able to conquer Canada.
We have another one from Habez, once again, Tavares, and he says travel recommendations. It's a very fun question.
Turkey is, I'm going to just go straight up for memes. Turkey is a great country. Not my favorite, though. Turkey, amazing food, amazing travel. France, you should go to France. Beautiful country, amazing food. New Zealand, wonderful country. New Zealand is like the Shire of the real world, and it's just very beautiful, calm, and people are happy. Wait, I just see the meme, Reddit, why can't you be normal? The Discord screams. Reddit is not normal. Both of those communities are toxic. Or actually, I like Discord. I like the Discord more than the Reddit because the Discord is like, it's not filled with venomous envy and desire to tear down. Reddit just seems like it ends up becoming a very toxic space that wants to tear everything down. And Discord, that is less of the case. But Discord's like weird and it can get like perverted and bizarre. Speaking of perverted and bizarre.
We're already on it.
Okay. How does this guy have so many IPs? It's just ridiculous.
I wouldn't be surprised if he's someone we both know who is quite salty at you. We can
Really?
talk about that off the call though. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. What else?
We have another question from a subscriber, and then I think we should try the functionality to bring Alexi on stage after.
Nice.
So
there's a couple people in the chat that I know as human beings, and so I'd like to bring them on over time.
Oh, absolutely. Let's do that. That sounds fun. So the question that we'll hit before bringing people on stage is from Joshua Yanka, who's a subscriber once again. And he says, what are your guys' thoughts on the Northwest Passage being a major trade route that passes through Nunavut, Canada?
The Northwest Passage is determined by global warming, and the problem with global warming is we have no accurate understanding of where it's going. So the thing with climate models is that it's anywhere between like the modern world ending and the ice caps melting and Miami gone and like the Amazon becoming a new sea and just New York gets the weather of Baltimore. And the Northwest Passage is already starting to become palatable where people can go in it. However, I don't know how important Nunavut would end up being as a port because it's very difficult to build anything up there because there's no materials. Everything has to come in by boat. But at the same time, modern container ships are so developed they don't need to
Oh, I think we had Rudyard cut out for a second, so he'll join really quick. It might be the internet at his place. It is.
This isn't the 18th century where if you're going to sail from England to India, you have to stop in South Africa to like not starve. And you just sail from England to India now. I'm going to get some hot water. I'll be right back.
Sure. I'll just say random things. And so guys, basically some updates with the product this week are we are going to be beefing up our moderation and ban functionality for next week so that the chat won't be, spammed in the manner that it has been. Apologies for that. And then besides that, we're trying to push the subscriber stuff because if we can get Rudyard to a critical mass of subscribers on Pearl, he'll be doing these live streams weekly and we'll keep adding new things to them. So for example, today we're able to prioritize subscriber questions because their names are in gold with a gold ring around it. For people who previously subscribed, we might have to go back into the database and mark that down for you. So my apologies if you end up being missed. Just at me in the chat, Matthew, DeMarc Antonio, and let me know. Um, and also, with the subscription, not only do you get your questions prioritized out over others, but we're going to test right now some new functionality. It might have a couple problems, but it might work well. And it's to invite someone up on stage to have a conversation with Rudyard, which is pretty cool. So I think we're going to try that right now with Alexi. Alexi, could you raise your hand? And when we see that, we'll bring you up on stage. And also, Rudyard, if you see anybody who has their hand raised currently,
Okay.
feel free to bring them on.
Oh,
Alexi, can you try
perfect
again?
intro. Alexi, can I use your real name in conversation?
I think Alexi's joining right now. Oh,
Yeah.
here he is.
Hi. Can I use?
Welcome on stage.
Okay. Wow. Fascinating. Your dad really did love Russia.
Is hilarious. So, my mother is the one that wanted to give me a Russian name. She wanted to give me the name Alexei, which is why it's the one that I use online. It's the one that she wanted. It's because he's the last Tsar Prince of Russia. And then when my dad heard that, then he wanted to give me the name Yuri after Yuri Gagarin because my dad is a tanky.
Fascinating. So,
Yeah.
Yuri is a friend of mine. I met him because he was in my comment section for every single video, and he had very intelligent comments. So I basically just gave my email handle to him, and I was like, "Yo, reach out to me." And that's how we met. But Yuri was at my place last night in New York, and
I'm literally downstairs right now. I'm at the
You are?
yes, I'm at the Turkish restaurant.
Wow. Okay. But okay. And yeah, so Yuri is a professional trucker, and we actually recorded something for Pearl last night.
Yes. Yeah, we did like a podcast style thing. We were reacting to a John Oliver video, but it got really late and Rudyard had to go to bed, and so we actually didn't finish reacting to the video. We got like 15 minutes in. It's like a 24-minute video.
Yeah.
Sorry, sorry, I was dealing with some Pearl stuff for a second. What was the topic of the thing that you guys recorded?
I'm getting my hot water.
Trucking. So John Oliver made and there was a John Oliver bit about the trucking prices and about how trucking has a retention problem and how apparently it's capitalism's fault. Though he did actually make a nod to how regulations are negatively affecting, particularly hours of service regulations are negatively affecting truckers. So that's something that I liked, and I gave him kudos for that. But yeah, it was about trucking, and we decided to react to that one specifically because it's kind of my area of expertise. Well, one of them because it's what I'm doing for a living now.
Mm. So something interesting is that I read that Chinese domestic trucking is down 87%, which is, I mean, that statistic is pretty terrifying, would make you think that China's very soon to have a massive economic collapse. What are your thoughts on that? What do you imagine is going on there and how severe the implications? folks on stage in a second too
okay.
to put their questions.
What is that?
Okay, so Noah Tyler Pritchett, do you want to get on?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah, I was
Michelle,
looking at the food. I didn't...
Raise your hands,
Okay.
Noah Tyler Pritchett, if you want to come on.
Oh,
Okay, so guys, for the functionality for the audio room today, we have the ability to bring people on stage,
I'll do
but we're
baka.
having
Yes,
trouble removing people from stage. So basically, whenever you're preoccupied with something, like Alexi, could you mute yourself when you're preoccupied with ordering or when completed with the question? Because we have to cycle through multiple people on stage.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But
Sure.
anyway, I'm done ordering. So.
Okay, cool. You guys should carry on with the conversation a bit, and then when you guys wrap up in a second, just mute yourself, Alexi, and we'll invite the next person on stage to talk.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we were talking about trucking in China, and I was saying that, I mean, I'm not really surprised that trucking's down 87% because the entire Chinese economy, as far as I know, is shut down because of their extreme COVID lockdowns.
I'm just surprised they're not in a Great Depression right now. I don't know how they have the tools to artificially keep the economy looking like it's not in complete free fall.
We have, I mean, we didn't go through a recession during COVID because it's a short-term thing. Recessions tend to be organic and civil, and recessions that are caused by external stimuli tend to behave differently. Like World War I is technically a recession, but it acted very differently because of the war. And same with like Spanish influenza.
Some of the effects of a recession are still retained when the recession's artificial. For example, during COVID, you had a heck of a lot of a heck of a lot of small businesses that shut down because of the COVID recession because they couldn't survive it. A lot of those places are places that wouldn't have survived an organic recession either. And so then that causes the sort of clearing of capital effect that you get from a recession.
Fascinating.
So, Rudyard, we have a few people with their hands raised. I guess, Alexi, could you?
Yeah,
you and
I'll just mute myself. It was lovely talking to y'all.
Cool. Feel free to chime back in too. It's just I'm going to mute myself as well when Rudyard's talking with a new person up on stage. Ready for the next person to jump in, Rudyard? Or are you having some audio problems right now? Okay. Well, I guess I'll just talk about random things while we wait for Rudyard to reconnect, and I'll shoot him a little message. Thanks for dealing with all the bugs and such, everybody. So this is the second release that we've done of this product, and beta launches for products inevitably always just have like lots of bugs and errors. And quite frankly, our team's overwhelmed by the amount of stuff we have to build. So we've been choosing how to prioritize what to do. And one of the main things we've been focused on is how do we really make the subscription of like $10 a month super beneficial to the fan base, because that's the number one way to get Rudyard to do live streams every week. And our hypothesis we wanted to test was that if basically we give people an opportunity to talk with Rudyard and meet him whenever he does a live stream, if they're subscribers, that's a very powerful thing. And so we're hoping that that works. And right now we're testing the earliest stages of that functionality by letting people raise their hands, and then we invite them on stage to have a conversation. The problem is we have to push an update at maybe during this live stream, but probably afterwards, that lets us remove people on stage. So we'll progressively invite some of you guys up on stage that we know personally to keep things low risk. And then when you're done having the conversation, just please mute yourself. And also keep it to like a minute, 2 minutes, or something of that nature. And then feel free to chime in later as well. So things will be much, much smoother with that starting next week. And we're getting Rudyard back in. So close the tabs. Okay, so we're having Rudyard rejoin the audio channel, and then once he does, then we will bring the next person on stage to have a conversation. Also, hey Scott, I see you've got your hand raised. We'll get you up on here. Mm, cool. So apologies for the delay, everybody. I'm just helping Rudder do something. I'll ask the team. Okay, channel. Probably close. Oh, also in the chat, I'm curious to hear you guys' thoughts are, what would make subscription really exciting to you? Is the best thing basically getting your questions answered during a live stream? Or is it instead being able to come up on stage and have a conversation? Or is it something else we haven't thought of? Very curious to hear your thoughts. Okay. Sweet. And also something that I've mentioned to you guys in the past is the roundtable audio rooms. So imagine if like you're driving home from work or from school or you're at a restaurant, and like you're just bored, you open up the Pearl WhatifAltHist community and you could listen in to other WhatifAltHist fans talk about history, and then you can turn your audio on to meet them and have conversations too. That's called roundtable audio. We've put that on the back burner for a few weeks to focus on other things such as monetization. And monetization is really critical because we have to get Rudyard to a critical mass of revenue to make this something that he has a very powerful incentive to do on a weekly basis. But with the roundtable, one of the reasons why we did prioritize it is audio rooms are extraordinarily expensive. It is like mind-bogglingly expensive to run a live stream. And so we're concerned that if we have a roundtable audio running, it'll just blast off the costs. And we're thinking to maybe, give everybody X number of hours for free per week, and then afterwards lock it under a paywall. So wanted to get your guys' take on that and just be transparent about what we're doing as a team and have something to talk about while we try and get Rudyard to rejoin too. Interesting, early access to videos. I'm not sure if we could do early access to, okay. 1 second, I'll get back to your questions, guys. Feel free to pop questions off in the chat and ideally at me so I can see
I think
notifications.
I'm sorry. So I think that if you guys wanted to do early access to videos and you didn't have the functionality in Pearl, it's relatively trivial to just have a private video with like accessible by link only on YouTube and then post a link on Pearl.
That's cool. Is that a big incentive to all you guys? Would you be pretty hyped to get a video maybe like 2 or 3 days before everybody else? Just pop it off in the channel. In terms of developers, like we definitely there's people like Pearl. Pearl fundamentally works as a product, is what we've discussed.
That's a pretty good question. No, my question was actually about like Poland's future as a great power, given the fact that Germany is remilitarizing. Basically, if you look at history, uh, whenever Germany is militarily powerful, or whenever really any large German state that's on the North German plain is militarily powerful. You know, historically it was Prussia. Uh, they will stump the ever loving fuck out of Poland, and so I'm not sure that. And so, I mean, I would love for Poland to step into the vacuum of Russia collapsing because I love Poland. It's one of my favorite countries,
True.
but I'm honestly not sure that that's feasible given that Germany's remilitarizing.
I'm not entirely I'm not entirely sure what the European theater is going to look like after this. I imagine that they're going to have to remain permanently under the American umbrella to not end up in the natural circumstance of killing each other. Like
Mhm.
the whole peaceful scenario that we've had since World War II is the extreme exception for European history, and I
Okay.
don't think it's necessarily an insult to a nation's civilization, to them being civilized, for them to be thrown into war by the nature of their history and their geography. It just is what it is. But
Yeah.
Rudyard always describes Europe like the Greek city
Well, first, I want to preface saying that I'm just pretty honored to be on the first roundtable of the official stream. Thanks for taking me. Honestly, I didn't have. I already had some questions answered in the chat, so all I wanted to. I was thinking the next. It was mentioned before the consciousness movement. You know, when we first realized we had consciousness, separating us from animals and whatever. Anyways, what's the next one? I was thinking, is it AI mixed and integrated with humans? Is that what the next steps would be if we even get there? I don't know. I don't know. That's the first thing that came up in the top of my head. Yeah.
still feel that like there's like a lot of people online who like still want like the return of like the German Empire, like the French monarchy, or like want Queen Elizabeth to take over Britain and like refound the British Empire. Like you see those people online a lot. So I feel like that if like the current system is going to fail, which it will, those people will take to the streets and try and take over the government to refound their idea, a more traditional Europe.
It could feel that way. I guess like when people face challenges and things are getting too different too quickly, very quickly, and, with external pressures, they might see and reflect back on things that traditionally had worked, and which I guess would be some sort of nationalism.
I think we're going to probably have far right wing backlash inside Europe. I mean, Douglas Murray put out a fascinating book called The Strange Death of Europe, and if you look at the statistics of Europeans, it is extraordinarily against things like immigration from the Middle East, and it's very shocking that their governments take policies that are so different than the opinions of the populace. And I guess it goes to show the system either has some strange flaw I don't understand, or is just very poor at representing the will of the people. But my default assumption is that I imagine America during this secular cycle crisis we're about to undergo, America and the West in general will have a battle between social justice and traditional conservatism. My assumption is that traditional conservatism will win by default because social justice is just such a radical ideology that really attacks the foundation of Western civilization and, in effect, honestly, taken to its extreme, tries to destroy it. But well intentioned, which is quite a strange thing to witness. And I imagine that we're going to see a big conservative backlash in America and probably a wave of it across Europe. My concern is I don't know how far it's going to go. I don't think we'll end up in a scenario where it leads to like, a conflict amongst Western powers at all, but it'd be quite odd to see massive nationalistic resurgences across Europe, especially given German rearmament and the ancient gears of war thawing across Europe given the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So I think the US's fist will keep it under wraps, but oh boy.
But I mean,
let's just hope Europe doesn't go back to the 1500s or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, like that's an interesting point. Like Europe has really undergone like a lot of conservative shit recently, and like it's had a lot of like historical decadence with conflict. But like the thing about the Americans like keeping it under the fist, keep it under control, I feel like that's kind of losing its grip. Like America doesn't want anything to do with Europe. It doesn't want anything to do with like the Middle East. It wants nothing to do with the world. So I feel like that America wouldn't care enough to keep Europe under a heel. Like if it's not a problem to them, just let the Europeans be, Especially
but if there's like
all conservative.
a war.
Do you gentlemen ever listen to Peter Joseph, or have you watched those movies, Zeitgeist, etc.?
Oh, that movie's awesome. It's a wild ride of a movie, though.
What movie?
Zeitgeist. Zeitgeist as well as its sequels. He actually has his ideas are really interesting. He talks a lot about like, okay, I think he misses them. Like his core premise is, how do we engineer a society where everybody has abundance, and also all decisions are based on data as opposed to ideology.
But inherently, like data inputs have biases by the programmers or stuff that input them or collect the data. Isn't that like part of the discussions? No.
That's interesting. I mean, really, like you can use statistics to make any. I guess it just depends on your priorities. Like, what are your desired outputs, and then solving for why. But it's a very interesting way to look at how do you engineer a society. What do you guys think?
I can't say I've ever heard of it, but it does sound interesting.
Oh, also as a note, Permit, you are now on stage. I remember you had a bunch of questions you're asking, so feel free to hit us up with them. And Ariel, could you send your question in the chat and at me right now? Sorry, what was that about? Anyone really can't speak. Oh yeah, guys, if you're on stage and you're wondering why you can't speak, make sure that you allow audio permissions. And if you're having trouble after a few seconds, refresh the page. If you're on a Mac, Command Shift R allows you to hard refresh and then rejoin the general chat channel. Michael Kinney, no, I did not see that. Feel free to raise your hand and come up on stage. And permit, I can't hear you right now. I would probably try hard refreshing and then allowing your microphone permissions so you can come up and talk. Okay, cool. Just keep giving it a try and speak when you're back up on stage. Also, guys, as an update, WhatifAltHist, we're working with him on something now. I think we are probably going to have him rejoin this general chat, or what we'll do is we'll start a subscribers only chat. So to plug it once again, basically, if you become a subscriber, which is like $10 a month, then you'll be able to hop up on stage and talk with Rudyard one-on-one and ask questions and meet him, as well as meet other fans. And then there's other things such as we'll prioritize answering your questions massively. So if you've got a burning question, you'll get it answered. Okay, hey everybody.
Scott.
Oh, sorry, carry on.
Oh, like I guess like it seemed like it was a loose end on that Scott's mention of his question. Like, would that work like a republic would? Because if the majority, oh, did he disappear? Oh, he disappeared.
Oh, I'm not sure.
What
I'm still
Wait,
here.
keep responding to it. Oh, okay.
Oh shoot, where's my thought? He was
Would it
saying
be
something
structured like
about
a republic?
like the data points, like if we're ruled by some sort of algorithm, like inputs, like, oh, because the majority want this, we all will have this policy, like we'll just be ruled by I think that's what he meant by his question.
I don't know. It's that's a I don't know how the actual logistics of it would play out. Like I've thought about this a lot, and
Anyway.
there's two ideas that that come to mind is like how Ray Dalio has got like how Bridgewater is organized. Like if you're not familiar with Bridgewater, it's the largest hedge fund in the world. Is he has scorecards for everybody? Like every one of his employees is graded based on strengths, weaknesses, what their predispositions are. Are they more big picture oriented versus detail oriented, etc. So what's an interesting idea is like how do you like making decisions for votes based on merit? For example, like say we had Rutger as an example of making decisions based on foreign policy.
So I'm working on some Perl stuff. Anybody else got a reply you want to throw up to it?
Oh, so you guys were talking about that algorithm that like decides what to do based on what most people want. Is that basically just like pure democracy, but like RNG generated or something with like an AI at the charge? Because like if that's the case, that'd basically just be like what the flaws of democracy, but like less without democracy, Because what most people want is like, yeah, like most people want something, but doesn't mean they're correct. The flaws of democracy is that most people are just really kind of stupid. So like that's the reason why most governments in history were not democratic. It's because it's easier to respond to stuff and rule a nation when it's based around a single person or a body or a government instead of the general public, since they're usually more educated.
So I assume they're probably going to get down very low. Like I would not be surprised if both Northern Ireland and Scotland were gone from England at some point.
Yeah.
It's
What
kind
about
of insane to
Wales?
see
Do
such
you
a
think like
powerful
Wales
country
would
fall apart.
separate?
I don't know enough to answer, but I'd say that that's probably the last to go.
Yeah, like it'd definitely be
Yeah.
the last to go, but like I wouldn't say that's out of the realm of possibility. Wales is often considered a part of England, but like it's always kind of been separate, you know? And they kind of seem like less represented in the countries than the other parts. Like they don't even like there's no symbol for Wales on the flag because they're considered a part of England. So that might incentivize the people of Wales to leave to forge their own identity instead of being like forced under this boot of England.
They got an interesting accent. I had a few Welsh friends.
Hmm. Yeah.
Inversion's question's so funny. What if 10 million Republican Americans moved to Canada? I mean, I don't know what the purpose of that would be. There's, I think, 10% of Canadians are living in America at the moment. If we're talking about a Canadian American unification, my assumption is that it's probably inevitable, especially as we see Canada get under major pressure from demographic crisis, as well as the implications that'll have for currency going way up in terms of its value, which will mess up their resource exportation. And then I assume that that'll be enough energy to split Quebec from the rest of Canada and will absorb the rest of it. And the question becomes is that does absorbing all of non-French Canada make America more left-wing and therefore decrease? I mean, in general, my perspective is high taxes, high regulations decrease the economic productivity and efficiency of the country and cause problems over time. So absorbing Canada could accelerate the kind of like Leviathan leans left dying process of America. But I think America is very young and it's got centuries to go, if not a millennia.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
But what
the
about
new
like
world, eh?
British Columbia? WhatifAltHist said that it'd probably become its own independent country, but I feel it's unlikely. It'd probably just become a connection between like America and Alaska from like the mainland.
British Columbian here.
Yeah, like the cities has a powerful like independent economy, but I don't feel it's independent enough to like warrant becoming its own country. It'd probably just get absorbed with the rest of Canada.
We'll need a major bailout. The one thing I know about Vancouver, living here myself, we're still waiting for the big one. There's a century, every century earthquake waiting to happen here. We'll need a major bailout. We've got massive flooding, forest fires, and we've needed a lot of funding from the other provinces. So I don't know if who's going to buy out.
Yeah, so I feel like that too. Like I didn't even consider that. I just considered like economic ties with the rest of the North America, but like that too, like natural disasters. It's like I feel like the government on its own wouldn't be able to handle that, so it kind of be forced to either integrate with the wider American government for help, or just fall apart.
Yeah, seeing
So
it as a
guys,
port city. Oh, sorry.
I've got a text from Rudyard for something I want to.
So on the topic of North America, what do you guys think will happen to Puerto Rico?
most probably, and the definition of being American will most likely expand from being just English speaking to maybe beyond, or maybe it'll dig deeper in there and Puerto Rico will anglicize. But I just assume the broad definition of America, as well as its territory, will continue to expand until it reaches its dying phases.
Yeah. You bring up that interesting thing about like race and what's considered American. Like I live in America, I've lived there my entire life, and I really don't like consider that and who's American. Like when I walk down the street, I don't think like I see like people who's like Hispanic, Asians, blacks. I don't really consider them different from me, a white guy. Like we're all like if they live here, they they follow the law. They don't cause issues. Like they integrate to our way of life, and like don't cause problems. They can be American all they want. That's like the beauty of America. It's the melting pot of the world. And like sure,
It's
like
a very
they're all like ethnic conflicts, yeah. Like oh, sorry, what you saying something?
it's a very impressive the ability of America to absorb new people. Like it's shockingly impressive.
Yeah.
So I've something I want to address. Someone, I think Julius posted on the news feed a while ago, asking about Rudyard's credibility as well as his sources after watching the Vouch debate. So Rudyard's one of my closest friends, but I didn't meet him until I'd already watched basically every one of his videos a year and a half ago. What I will say is this: the reason why I reached out to Rudyard was because he, in my opinion, was the single smartest, most brilliant person I've ever seen in history / geopolitics. I've watched basically every YouTube channel. I read a bunch of books on the topic, and his mind just had something very special to it. I'd break intelligence into processing power, the speed you can figure things out, memory, pretty obvious, and then metacognition. Metacognition is the rarest, and it's the ability to take extraordinarily different and meta high-level ideas and to weave them together into intricate patterns. Rudyard has a very special gift for that. I've met a couple of people before who have it, and those people I've met who have it for startups. So Naval Ravikant and Paul Graham are two of the greatest startup investors in the world. And what I would say distinguishes both of them is their metacognition is off the charts, like super genius level. These are both, middle-aged men who've had long, very distinguished careers in startup world. And what's I noticed about Rudyard is that his was on that same level of just a true gift. So in terms of things like I've hung out with Rudyard a ton, his entire house is a giant series of bookshelves. They're everywhere. Whenever we meet up, we go to some bookstore and he buys like stacks of 20 or 30 books. And the next time I see him, he's read all of them. So what I will say is that he is not only inherently gifted with metacognition, he also puts in the work like crazy and has probably read more on this topic than everybody else I've ever met combined. Until I met him, I thought I'd never really met anybody from my hometown who knew as much about history and geopolitics as me. And then Rudyard just wiped the floor with me. So I find it very strange when people try to question his credibility and his sources, given that it just seems so obvious to me when you listen to him. Like, you can't make this stuff up. It's like off the charts. And he's constantly quoting various people too, like Peter Turchin and the French guy whose name I'll butcher, like Amelia Diancourt. So anyway, like I find it really odd how the community asks questions about this and thought it was worth addressing and putting my personal anecdotal stuff into it. Yeah. But like, we're all watching him for a reason. It's because he's incredible. So like, I don't know what the big fuss is about.
May I speak for a moment?
Yeah,
like,
go for it. Rip it.
Yeah, like earlier today, just today, I was like having a debate on this guy on another app. I mean, it's not too big, but like he was like saying that this like WhatifAltHist, he's like, just like not a credible source. He doesn't list his sources, just makes a bunch of baloney up. I'm like, dude, no, he doesn't. Like, have you watched his videos? The guy's a genius. He's like a complete expert on this stuff. Probably the best expert I've ever seen in my life. He knows more about this stuff than anyone I've ever seen. Like, you just can't make it up.
I totally agree. I don't know of any other YouTube channels that are anywhere close to the level of metacognition. Yeah. Like I check YouTube every day to see if he's posted a new video because it's just like I need this stuff, and I have too much going on with Pearl to be able to sit down and pour through all these books. So I feel like I get to almost vicariously read these incredible books and watch Rudyard's mind piece them together.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I bought a handful of books just because of the ones he listed, just to see the source material myself.
They're very interesting. I just read one called "The Coming Caesars," which is a really fascinating hypothesis about the natural process of culture evolving to civilization, evolving to Caesarism over hundreds of years, and how America is very far into it. That book was extraordinarily obscure, like extreme. Some more of you guys who are in the audience, if you've got questions, feel free to raise your hand and we could bring you up on stage. Our team is still working on getting the subscriber only stage rolling where Rudd will rejoin. And we'll basically take this roundtable that we have here, but we'll expand it with more people and everyone will be able to talk with Rudyard as a group one-on-one.
All right.
So anyway, feel free to raise your hands and we'll bring you up on stage if you've got some questions. So guys on stage, I've hey, Permit, you have to click the hand raise button and we'll give it a try. There might be a technical error blocking us from bringing you up, which I apologize for, but give it a shot and I'll do it. Oh, Dutch, I'll let the team know. We'll get you next time. Just remind me, Dutch and Permit. We'll get your questions answered. So guys on stage, to spice things up a little bit, the whole world looks like it's about to explode. I mean, Russia and Ukraine seems like it could lead to regime change right there. Finland and Sweden probably joining NATO is going to trigger Russia. Zahan's talking about Russia's desire to go beyond to the Baltic states and Poland and the possible use of nukes. Xi Jinping apparently had a stroke pretty recently, and he's worried about. So yeah, they saw a bunch of him limping around, and they assume it was a stroke. Putin apparently has Parkinson's too. People are saying.
Oh yeah.
You mean like how he walks, like with his one hand to the side? I think I
know
heard a
that's
video
a
on that.
KGB thing.
Yeah, that's a KGB thing. I was gonna say, like, it's just his training. Like, he even said it himself. Like, once you go KGB, you never go back.
Yeah.
Or like something like that.
So Pablo, we're basically having some technical stuff we're doing. So we're going to be starting a subscriber only chat channel where you'll be able to have a conversation with him in a little bit. There's a possibility we don't get it fixed in time, but that's the plan. Anyway, guys on the stage, the whole world seems like it's about to explode. And then the next piece is the whole famine stuff. It seems insane to think that like a huge percentage of population can die from famine, but that's kind of the default during these crises. And in sub-Saharan Africa and the Middle East and South Asia, it seems possible. What have you guys read about this topic, and what's your take? You think it's overhyped, or you think we're about to see a true historical like crisis emerge?
Who wants to speak? Well, okay. So I even went through a lot of some sources that were saying that there's a fix because the way that it's almost like the white savior sort of thing, but some academics in Africa were saying, well, there's just not enough training. The way that people are using their farmland, and it's quite limited itself, but they don't use it to the extent where the soil gets nutrition to lay another crop. There's a mention that a lot of the soil is nitrogen deficient, and the way to fix it is legumes, making and farming beans, stuff like that, and legumes, right? Whoever, maybe I'm mispronouncing that, but and there's just to make it more sustainable, but there's got to be a diet shift, and I don't know. It just seems that way. If not well versed.
Yeah, like I'm not gonna claim to be an expert either. Like personally, like I just like watch some videos about it, maybe watch the news sometimes. But like I'm not a guy, like I have a very short attention span, so like reading books is just like a nightmare for me. Because like I just struggle to keep my focus. So I would kind of just avoid it. But like, yeah, I feel like this like if like the world doesn't like figure something out soon, like there's just going to be a huge crisis, like a lot of food shortages. It's like not the thing that we're like producing like not enough food. It's like we're producing plenty. It's just that it's not evenly distributed.
It's kind of like what's happening here in the United States. And I think, they were talking about, oh, the right wing versus left wing, like pushback that could happen in Europe. What I think is happening here in the US is something similar to that, but it's more of a, hey, the right wing is starting to get, more populist, as time has gone on. It's now developed to where the hardcore right wing is very much 10% rather than the 20-30% that it used to be. And the more classical liberal side of things has started to take hold in ways that we have not seen before, at least in my opinion, in the US. I being Baptist or from a Baptist family, I've seen the evidence of that. But now it's like you've got these enclaves. You got New York, you've got California, you've got Colorado, and you've had these enclaves that have started to form of the more left wing, uh, centralized ideals that are starting to form because now they've realized, oh crap, we lost like spectacularly on the wider stage because let's face it, communism, socialism, and other very left leaning distinct ideologies aren't that popular among the people. And so the more classically liberal individuals are starting to take root again. And I think that's where the United States is going. I think that's why the United States is looking internally.
But the problem
I-
is that, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I disagree with your Russia assessment, and that's for reasons I've talked about before in other videos. I just don't think Russia has the intangibles, and I don't think they had the tangibles either. I don't see Russia having a lot going for it. I think it's in worse shape than China, actually. And I don't think left-wingers realize they have lost. Like, look at Vaush's fan base. They think what he's saying, which is something 95% of Americans would disagree with, is totally reasonable, and disagreeing with it is unreasonable. Left-wingers have an enormous skill for disillusioning themselves as to the nature of their ideologies.
Sorry.
When I talk to left-wingers, they just think that they are the majority of America's population, and evil NRA lobbies are like destroying the rest of the country and preventing it from
fully
that.
I fully agree with that assessment. It's the Twitter dichotomy, because unfortunately, and we've started to see this now with the Elon Musk deal. Twitter convinced itself that they were in the majority, and now they're like, wait, why did I lose 300,000 followers on Twitter? What happened? And it's like, they were all bots. Welcome to the botting age. And with Vosh, he's a fun little just gremlin in my mind. I don't have any respect for the man whatsoever. His and minus, I haven't even actually watched the video that you did with him. Honestly speaking, I think talking to Vosh and people like Vosh is a terrible fucking idea. I just, oh god, ew.
Yeah. A lot of my good friends like JJ McCullough need to move on to another one.
Yeah, go ahead. I need to head out anyways. So have a good one.
Okay. Take care, man. Okay, Mikhail, do you have what do you want to say? Hello?
He's on the Pearl team. I don't know if his
Oh, okay. Okay, sorry. I thought he was a WhatifAltHist fan. What fan wants to talk
also,
next?
yes.
Any questions? Bring someone on stage. Who wants to go on stage?
All right, we got Jake.
Hi, Jake. Pleasure to have you. What question do you have?
So I saw that Sweden and Finland are in the process of joining NATO. I just want to get your thoughts on that.
I mean, they've been de facto NATO allies for a very long time, and I think that this was sparked by Ukraine, because realistically, if either was attacked, NATO would defend them, and so they've acted like NATO allies, but they're not officially. And this is just a continuation of what the de facto situation was before.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Does anyone else? Nick 3 whatever. What's your question?
Oh, hey. My question is, like, how do you feel about like Europe's political future? Do you think it's going to go more conservative?
There is a half-an-hour video that I have just made about this.
Oh, really?
And it will be coming out this week.
Okay. Like, how do you feel about it? Like, do you want to talk about it here? Or you just
Its short answer is, I think that they will have a nasty crisis in which no wars break out, but there'll be famine and revolutions and general sadness. And then they will have a crash, and then they will re-enter the American sphere. Worst thing that happens is that a European anti-American crusade forms out of radical politics. I don't think that's super likely.
Yeah. And do you feel Europe will go more left or right in this coming like crisis?
Mostly right, but some parts will go left. I see Europe mostly going right because the European elite has been left-wing technocrat, and so it makes sense if right-wing populism is the backlash to the failure of said European boomer elite. But also Europe is a diverse place with a lot of left-wing sympathies. And so I could totally see, like, for example, Germany and France going right, but Greece or Spain electing communists, basically.
Yeah. And do you feel like some people like go, like when they go right wing, will they go like, like fascism or something? Like, will they like restore the old European monarchies or something?
Yeah, not monarchies. I could see. So the thing is, the old European technocrat elite made fascism the bogeyman, and as that group becomes less more disliked. I think you'd see fascism in action, but not fascism in name. So right-wing ethno-nationalist dictatorships that aren't technically fascist. And I also just think, like, I was talking with JJ about this yesterday, and a lot of times we LARP as political positions because no one's really like a fascist or a communist, like a neoliberal or like an anarchist. Like those are not serious political, like not new, like a 19th century style liberal. Those are not political positions that are tenable in the modern world. And we need to develop new ideologies for the 21st century. And I think in the same way, predicting fascism will be very difficult during World War I. Some new form of European authoritarianism will arrive. And I cannot tell you what it is. It doesn't exist yet.
All right. Out of like any European country, who do you feel like become like the new center of the continent, like the greatest power in Europe?
Probably France. Their population and economy is structured well for it.
And do you think the EU will survive in any form, like through this crisis?
I think it will have its dishonor shown to it, and then it will fail, and then America will make a new similar organization that it can use to control Europe with.
Yeah. And do you feel like any European countries are going to like absolutely fall apart and stop being a thing during this crisis? Like, will like the United Kingdom fall and like
probably like Ukraine or Belarus? That wouldn't surprise me. UK might split apart. I think it's likely Scotland gets independence.
Mm-hmm. Like, and will Ireland unite and like finally become
probably
a country? Yeah. And do you think the Balkans will unite against the Turkey in their encroaching power? Like, will they become basically like Turkish puppets?
The Balkans are incapable of unifying over anything.
Yeah.
As Winston Churchill said, it's an area that produces more history than it can digest.
Yeah, and like, will they become like dominated by the Turks? So, like, remain like an out of their reach?
I mean, you've seen my video on this subject, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I've seen your video, but like, I don't really remember much about it. It was a while ago.
Yeah, I do think the Turks will colonize them, but I have to move on to the next person. Makiej, what's your question?
You're really, really quiet.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I can't hear Makiej.
Yeah, you're really quiet.
Yeah.
Yeah, Makiej, you're really quiet. Try getting closer to the mic.
Yeah.
Okay. Now better?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so my question is regarding the American interest in Europe. Why America is so interested in helping Ukraine?
I'm not sure America is that interested in helping Ukraine. Like a third of the world is, or something like that, is an American ally, and that if they're attacked, America will protect them. Ukraine is not one of that, which puts it in the America doesn't super care category. Also, Ukraine is part of Europe, and Ukraine is part of Europe, and America cares deeply about Europe due to ethnic and cultural ties. On top of that, the American public is just an angry, like, Twitter mob that will be riled up against anything.
We have a couple questions in the chat.
Okay.
If you want to hit those quickly. Okay, so Ivo is asking, what is the opinion on Bulgaria in relation with Turkey and Russia?
I know Bulgaria is a strong, like, Russia likes Russia a lot. They had one of the better. They were an ally of Russia. I know that they were one of the countries that had a better time under communism relatively, and so I'm sure they'd like to ally with Russia if Russia gets more powerful, but I don't think Russia will survive in a manner that makes that possible. On top of that, I just think, I mean, we all know what I think of the Balkans. I think the Turks are going to colonize the area, and the Bulgarians wouldn't want to be colonized, but if their population is halving and America is not paying attention, I don't know how they could hold off the Turks.
Awesome. And why is Turkey trying to block Sweden and Finland from joining?
I had no idea they were. I mean, the Turks are kind of troll lords. It's hard to know exactly what game they're playing.
Cool. All right. If anyone has more questions in chat, I'll read those next. If anybody else wants to raise their hand and ask a question, go ahead.
Matthew, what is your answer to how often these will be held? I think the Japanese are very good at just intuitively changing to whatever the rest of the world is doing. So I think the Japanese will go through the currents. And if the next cultural current is conservative and aggressive, so would the Japanese be. I don't know. Lukashenko's kind of a hard guy in Belarus. I think he could maintain power if Russia falls, but it's not likely. Why are internet nerds so obsessed with anime? I don't understand. Alexei, I made a video about this. I think Poland has a decent chance. I think Germany's a more likely chance, but Poland does. Poland has already built a network in Eastern Europe that's very powerful. I have a team, so I'd say that to construct a video is like 25 hours total, but I'm not the only person doing that work. No idea who's going to be elected president in the Philippines. It's a really weird situation where the son of the former dictator is running ahead, is ahead in the election. Favorite video I've made is probably the future of ideology. Okay. So looks like we're out of questions. I'm going to leave in a couple of minutes. Do you guys have anything else? Nick Stream Gaming, it really depends on local American conditions. I think the US will pull away and then return to Europe after like a decade or something. I think, as I talk about in the next video, I think the Mithridatic Wars is a very good parallel to what the future of America and Europe is.
All right, looks like we got maybe one more. Brady, if you're typing something.
I wanted to thank you for the Russia video in January. It really helped with my post-communist politics class I took this semester. My professor seems to hold the same views of you on Russia. It really feeds my ego when I talk about an area that I just read about in books. And then some specialist person who lives there is like, that's on spot. Like one of my I had a Serbian friend who saw the Orthodox video and he's like, you did a great job. Or like, I look at a country that I've like barely been to like Germany, and the Germans say you nailed that video, or Chinese people say I nailed the China video. And I'm just really thankful that, and I'm happy that local insiders say I'm doing a good job. But I am going to head out now. This was a pleasure, guys. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Looks like we got a ton of stuff answered.
The author, to believe, is Amaury Duriancourt. Okay. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.